what do you think is going to be the most interesting thing to watch over the next, I don't know, 2 years, or either maybe a technology or a change? If it was a horse race, what would be the name of the horse you'd back?
I think for me, there's going to be a couple of things. I think there will be some companies, and maybe small to medium-sized companies, who will come out of the pack with a radically new way of running their business.
So this is oil production company, oil and gas
Or,
producers.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and midstream companies, and we're already beginning to see that. There are some companies that we've worked with. There are some which we've not worked with, which are companies to watch. Certainly, the one that people talk about a lot in the US is EOG, and it's worth looking at their quarterly reports, which have been being published. It's interesting to see that their quarterly reports to the stock market include a whole page on technology and a whole page on culture and organization, and you don't see that in any other quarterly reports, or rarely, certainly not to the level of detail. And they keep their cards pretty close to their chest, but clearly their performance is outdoing the market at the moment. So I think we are beginning to see that. I think we are going to see, in the big companies, we're going to see some consolidation, maybe into regions. So I think there's maybe a move to a regional support model rather than a country-based stroke asset support model. So how can you share resources across country boundaries and across multiple assets? And so that, will get the support costs down. And so instead of everybody having a pipeline engineer, or you'll be able to share them. I think there are some interesting moves which are going on in mining around moving to full remote control of operations. It is made easier by the fact that they don't have the end of field life problem. So the mines that we've worked with in South America, I mean, one of them celebrated its 50th anniversary, and the projected lifetime is at least another 150 years. So they just, there's no reason not to spend the money as soon as possible, because the sooner you spend it, the more benefit you get. So they have different drivers, but I think what they've done in terms of integrating value chains from what they call pit to port, and the fact that they've removed multiple control rooms in the field in mine locations to city centre locations is a trend we're going to see in oil and gas. So you could imagine, a company saying, why, and maybe it works better with some of the gas operators like Perenco, but why wouldn't you could remotely control all of your offshore gas assets from London, and it's not, technically it's not a big stretch. Organizationally, it's a challenge, but technically it's a stretch. And then you can manage your entire business as a portfolio, as a region, and get some synergy from doing that. And I think we will begin to see that happening. I think the other thing that's happened in mining, which is kind of interesting, and Rio Tinto has done this, is they've organized themselves into asset types. So what they've said is, we're going to have a copper mining group and an iron ore mining group and a gold mining group and a potash mining group. And actually a copper mine in Salt Lake City has got more in common with a copper mine in Mongolia than it does with an iron ore mine down the road.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a peer group model. And I think that's something that could work well for the big multi-regional, multinational companies that says, actually, we're going to have a gas business, we're going to have an offshore oil business, we're going to have an onshore oil high well count business, or a shale oil type business. And you can already begin to see that in the fact that, BP spun out BPX in North America just to run shale assets. Now, okay, that's geographically described at the moment, but there's no reason why they couldn't support shale gas assets in Argentina, for instance.
Yeah.
So I think we'll potentially begin to see that. And I think we're going to see the integration of a lot of technologies coming together. So it will be technologies like analytics, it will be machine learning, it will be data capture, it will be automation, it will be robotization, it will be drones, it will be mobile worker, it will be all of those things. And I think, you know, until we get all of those things integrated and easily integrated, it's hard, you know, that's when the real transformation will come, I think. I don't think one technology on its own is going to do it.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly right.
And there's a lot of people advocating one technology is going to transform it, and I just don't get it.
This is back to what you were saying earlier about the early digital oil field. It was a combination of better instrumentation, better bandwidth, connectivity, some web technology. All these things had to come together to deliver.
Plus the integration with process workflow.
That's right. New ways of thinking about it.
And how you run the process workflow, and that comes into organization. And, you know, and I think, you know, what we've learned and what we've seen is, even though, you know, there has been challenges with a lot of the technologies, and certainly the integration of large, diverse, you know, data sets, which have, you know, not quality assured, has been extraordinarily difficult. And there's a lot of, you know, heroic failures have been seen in the last 10 years on this stuff. You know, but even when you get that bit right, it doesn't mean to say that the organizational change isn't still a challenge. So, you know, I mean, what will be going on at the moment, you know, with COVID-19 is that a lot of platforms in the North Sea and a lot of operations in, you know, offshore Angola or offshore Azerbaijan, you know, they'll be down on skeleton crews. So they'll be down on Christmas crews. They'll have taken everybody off. Everybody will be remote. Who can be working remotely will be working remotely. And so this is an opportunity. In many respects, it's an opportunity to say, okay, so you did have 100 people on the platform. Now you've got 60 or 50 or 70. Why can't you sustain that? Now, the answer to that sustainment, you know, or the barrier to sustaining that, probably won't be the technology, because we've been proving that during COVID-19 by everybody working remotely and doing this sort of stuff. But the challenges will probably be around organization and governance and things like that. So if you've got a technician who's been working four on, four off, expat technician out of Baku, and he's getting paid on a certain contract to do that, then he's going to be very reluctant to get paid less to do it all remotely. And that will be the kind of things which will be the barriers. And, you know, we've been in situations in Australia and Canada where we work with clients where they've said, we have to wait until we've got the union negotiations over and done with before we can do this.
Yeah.
It's that sort of stuff, I think, which is going to be the challenge. It's going to be, you know, what's the new operations and organizational model that's going to sustain this? You know, the technology needs to be there. It needs to be, you know, it needs to work. It needs to be simple. It needs to, you know, needs to support the processes and all the workflows. But I think it's how that technology is used and how those processes are going to be run, which is the issue. And overcoming 20 years or 30 years of this is the way we've done it.
But I think that's a fascinating summary, or excellent way to summarize it, really, Tony. What you're saying is there's going to be change. You're seeing the green shoots of some success. Some companies are now figuring this out. No, it's a bit secretive maybe, but the numbers are there implying it. There's going to be change, but as usual, there's going to be some difficulties as well, and it will be around the people and the process.
Yes, people, and process and organizational change. I mean, I think I think the other thing is that, you know, we've been not good at in oil and gas industry is how we contract in services or even, you know, technologies or even things like power. You know, if you look at, you know, why do we keep buying gas turbines and sticking them offshore when we could just buy megawatts off of GE or ABB, you know, and getting them to run it? And that's a contractual problem. That's because our projects have been contracting these things the same way, and they haven't updated their approach for saying how do we procure this.
That's a great subject, and that was almost a subject for a completely separate video. But procurement's a massive aspect of this, isn't it? Because it's,
yeah, especially in greenfield projects, absolutely.
Yeah, you have to change the way you buy stuff at the end of the day. You can have all the design you want, but if it just goes down the same process for buying it, you end up with the lowest cost. That's pretty much the only driver.
Correct. And I think, you know, the root cause of that is, you know, how you incentivize them, the project directors, and how you incentivize the operations managers. I mean, I was in the position of being an operations manager on a new project, and I was fortunate enough to have, you know, initially have a project director who was pretty enlightened, who was willing to listen to his operations manager. But that's often not the case. And when you have an operations manager reports to a project director, well, he can jump up and down as much as you want, but you know, at the end of the day, his bonus might not be great if he does, you know. So, you know, the whole system has not been there, you know, it's been there to reduce capex at all costs, you know, rather than trying to optimize both capex and opex in tandem, really.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, you know, as an ex-operations guy, if we're allowed to influence projects early enough, we can make significant differences to both capex and opex. And we've been doing the work. We've done probably a dozen, maybe more, 14 studies over the last 3 or 4 years, and we're seeing an absolute trend. So we're seeing, you know, if you get in early enough on a greenfield project, we're seeing reductions in opex, predicted opex for year one of between 50 and 80%, and we're seeing reductions in capex of between 25 and 45%, 40%, and we've got numbers to justify that. So we can see it in the, you know, topside weight reduction, you know, in terms of greenfield projects. So if you move to a remote, unmanned type of operating model, and you can embed that in early enough in the project, you can make significant savings.
Yeah.
And it's not just more capex to reduce opex; it's lower opex and lower capex.
That sounds like a no-brainer in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. You know, we've presented, and as you know, you've been in some of the conferences where we presented this. I mean, people either don't believe it, or are extremely skeptical about this. But we've been involved with some projects where, you know, it follows through. I mean, if you want to reduce OPEX, then, you know, you've got to reduce the number of people on board. If you want to reduce the number of people on board, you need to reduce the amount of work that there is for them to do. And the easiest way to reduce the work is to reduce equipment.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you reduce equipment, you have less capex.
That's right.
The logic
actually works. Yeah.
The logic is right. So, you know, and the companies that we've seen do this very well, they have ultra high availability. So they get very high availability, but they don't get it by sparing, because if you spare,
got more equipment.
You got more equipment, so you need more people, more maintenance. And not only that, it gives the procurement guys a get out of jail card, because if you spare by having 2 100s or 3 50%, then if they buy not such good kit, it doesn't matter so much. Whereas if you've only got 1 100, you've got to make sure it's absolutely right. So the attitude of the people who are speccing the equipment and in the project phase is different.
Yeah. It's I think we could almost do another video on how to actually minimum man, but we've already chatted for an hour pretty much.
Yeah.
So it just flies by.
No, it's been good.
It's brilliant. I mean, the insights that you have, Tony, are just fantastic, and the way you're able to tie it in with just case studies from history, and because you've got the credibility from having worked there, you know, it's no one can argue. It's not like.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a workshop 3 weeks before Christmas in Houston, and it was quite funny. And there was a bunch of operations. It was mostly operations guys, and we were looking at the design of a next generation semi-submersible, you know, for deep water Gulf of Mexico. And there was a new Gulf of Mexico standard design being developed, and this was a cross-company standard design. Yeah. And it was using tried and tested technology off the shelf, which means cheap, of course.
Oh, okay.
And we ran a workshop where we went through the equipment list, and, you know, we were challenging you know, what could be removed, or what could be, you know, what could be done elsewhere. So could you know, run a cable and do remote power, run a power from another platform, all that sort of stuff. And it was very, very interesting in the fact that, you know, even the operations guys were saying, well, no, we have to have one of these. And I was going, why do you need one of these? You know, and they were going, well,
We've always had one.
One of these, you know, nitrogen generator or oxygen, you know, air systems. You know, if you go fully electric, what do you need air systems for? You know,
Yeah.
you know, all of that sort of stuff. So you can collapse this stuff if you know what it's doing. But, you know, and we spent 2 or 3 days convincing them that this was okay, and eventually they took it.